I'm Jamal, and you're listening to Get In The Mecha, your weekly anime and manga analysis podcast. From inspiring arcs to game-changing cinematography, I'm on a journey to try and make sense of it all, episode by episode. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to Get In The Mecha, and in today's episode and the first of our Minisodes series, which I am going to be talking about the animators which I really like and kind of inspire me. This week we're going to be talking about the animation of Yutaka Nakamura. Yutaka Nakamura is probably one of the most popular, if not the most popular animator in the anime space at the moment. Mostly for their action animation from everything from the tram scene in Cowboy Bebop to their most recent and very explosive animation within My Hero Academia. So what exactly makes their animations so engaging? I've reduced it down to 3 very key features. First off is the way of which they use smears, these extensions of movements and effects. To me, Nakamura often treats their visual effects with this very sharp, razor-type look. They spread outwards and they also point very outwards too. Extending the effects or the movement often creates a sense of speed and also pressure as well. If we have something like lava or fire which is emerging from the ground, the way in which Nakamura would smear it is that it appears as if it's bursting out of the ground, and I feel like that creates much more aggression as opposed to if it was not plunging out of the ground like the way in which he animates it. Also, by smearing subjects and characters in this way, it appears as if they are whizzing past the camera in a way which the camera can't really handle. It's not overly done, but it's moving slightly faster than it maybe should be, and this is a really great visual illusion created by Nakamura. Impact frames are also a very big part of Nakamura's action animation too. Usually, from what I've seen, their impact frames are used to represent some sort of activation, be it of a power, like my favorite examples would be Izuku or Deku's One For All power, or Jiro's power within Concrete Revolution. They're often highly contrasting in terms of color, using either black and white or red and black occasionally, and also appear very raw a lot of the time when they are in black and white, or sometimes even quote-unquote black and yellow, because they're contrasting the pencil lines to the paper, and a lot of the time we're able to see pretty much the paper if you're pausing through each frame. You can see the pencil lines and the paper, and it appears much more raw and quite authentic. And then finally we have cubic or cubic-esque debris. I say cubic-ish or cubic-esque because not every bit of debris that Utapon animates is exactly a cube, but it takes the form of a cuboid or something similar. It breaks the natural order of what we understand as debris. Debris is often seen as irregular in how it breaks off, but when it breaks off in a form of which has some sort of pattern or correlation, when you have multiple cubes of similar sizes breaking off a building, I think that makes it much more interesting to watch, as it highlights the strength of the characters and also how absurd the world in which they're in. It reminds us a lot of how some of these stories are quite detached from realism. They can also be used for transport as well, not in the way that you think, but often or sometimes they're used to progress fights or to progress some sort of action, and I think that is a really smart way of integrating something that not only looks cool, but also functions very well for its purpose, which is to create an engaging fight. So what can we learn from Nakamura's animation? For many of us, this was an introduction to the crazy world of action animation in anime, and it was an amazing introduction as well to many of these techniques, such as smears or impact frames, or debris and how it can be animated. The work of Nakamura is an excellent gateway into those starting to learn about Japanese animation and what it's all about. It's not the entirety of it, and I recommend looking further beyond it, like I would with any other animator, but I think that this is a great place to start, as I'm sure that Nakamura has animated probably one of your favorite fight scenes within anime. Nakamura also helps us a lot learn how influence works, as many action animators today have been inspired by Nakamura himself. when one is able to look into how other animators have delved into and used parts of the Nakamura toolkit, if you want to call it that, we can notice how this industry is so connected and how different anime, although might come from, say, different studios or from a different set of animators, this industry is very interconnected, and I think that the work of Yutaka Nakamura teaches us that this industry is much more connected than we might have thought. Thank you for listening to this minisode on Get In The Mecha. I hope you did enjoy it, and next week I will be bringing you another animator or another staff member which I really enjoy the work of. As always, if you do enjoy this podcast, feel free to leave it a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you do get your podcasts. Please also subscribe on YouTube, leave it a like and a comment, that helps other people find this channel. And finally, share this podcast with a friend if you do enjoy it and you do like insights or just discussions like this. If you want to explore more about the animation of Yutaka Nakamura, I will be putting their Twitter page in the description for this episode. They are absolutely amazing and really nice online too. And I will also be putting the link for their Sakaburo page, which has a collection of a lot of their animation work there. Thank you for listening, and I will see you on another minisode of Get In The Mecha. So that was the first minisode, which came out last week. Now let's go to the second minisode, which came out this week. I'm Jamal, and you're listening to Get In The Mecha, your weekly anime and manga analysis podcast. From inspiring arcs to game-changing cinematography, I'm on a journey to try and make sense of it all, episode by episode. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to Get In The Mecha, and in today's episode and the second minisode in our short intro 2 series where I look at animators that really inspire me and I really like in terms of their work, this week we are talking about none other than the action animation of Norio Matsumoto, so let's get into it. It would honestly be a disservice to the anime space and of course Norio Matsumoto if I wasn't to mention him when it comes to action animation. Not because Norio Matsumoto is the pioneer of action animation or something, but they play such a massive part in what it is today and how a lot of us, at least people of my age, understand it. It would truly be criminal to talk about action animation within anime across the past 30 years without mentioning Matsumoto. I think Matsumoto, similarly to Yutaka Nakamura, teaches us a lot about these fundamental parts of action animation and many parts which we take for granted. And by watching Norio very closely, you start to realize that this is why I understand these things to such a level and why I enjoy them so much. From their splendid fights in Hunter x Hunter 1999 and their iconic work in Naruto Part 1, the one which most people know being Naruto vs Sasuke, phenomenal fight by the way. What really continues to amaze me is how Matsumoto is so daring in their handling of characters. For the sake of showing an extra level of speed, they'll willingly tear apart the character, and a great example of this would be in Hunter x Hunter 1999, one of their most famous cuts, where Gon is running, and what they'll do is that they'll quite literally take apart Gon when he's trying to run, and you'll do that with the other characters chasing them too, and they'll smear them endlessly in order to just get that effect of speed that's necessary. They're able to take characters and really, and quite literally bend them to his will by bending and stretching them with these smears. They have these sort of elastic type smears when they run, and honestly, I think that is what makes Matsumoto's animation so iconic, partially because, again, similarly to what we spoke about last week with Yutaka Nakamura, they can be so recognizable at times. I would say today, because they do a bit less action work, they're not as recognizable, but when it comes to the fighting, you can just tell that this is what Matsumoto's all about, because they introduce us again to smearing as a concept, and they really take it as far as possible in order to meet the brief of which they're trying to get to within the fight, which they're animating. If we go back to Naruto Part 1 for a second, one of my favorite moments and demonstrations from Matsumoto is the fight between Sasuke and Orochimaru in the Forest of Death. This is so good for Orochimaru especially because it ties in so well with the nature of their character. As I said, this elastic-like look to Matsumoto smears an effect by almost bending the character and squishing them in a way, not exactly squash and stretch, which you would get from more traditional animations in the 20th century, but I more mean pulling them outwards to kind of show movement and acceleration. Again, this fits so well with a character like Orochimaru, who is all slimy and constantly weaving around, and Matsumoto also has an excellent technique there and works so well for very specific anime because that fits in with what some of these characters are all about, and when these two things marry, it's truly extraordinary, and I love that in any anime, just like we spoke about last week. These things aren't exclusive to Matsumoto, but they introduced me to a lot of concepts when it comes to action, one of them being storyboarding, and this was quite a long time ago. Not to say I didn't know what storyboard was, but in the way that certain action animators board their own action in certain works, like Norio has done in certain parts of Naruto movies, for example. Action choreography as a whole is very complex, and Matsumoto doesn't make it any easier particularly to understand, but at least they got me into the concept of it, and we can generally just take so much from action animators that take on the role of actually storyboarding and directing sequences, not only for themselves but for others too. They have a massive insight into how fighting works, and seeing that executed is also very interesting when something's executed within their vision, and overall Matsumoto introduced me to this too. Overall, Matsumoto's another great gateway animator, you could say, into fighting and action animation, but they're also one of the first animators generally that I really latched onto. They changed the way in which I view animation and generally just how fight choreography works, and just the concept of choreographing fights for an anime, which didn't really come to me unlike live action. They truly opened up my eyes to animation, and I honestly couldn't be more grateful. Thank you for listening to this episode of Get In The Mecha. That has been Minisode 2 of the podcast, or the short intro to series. I hope you are enjoying this, and I just want to say a very big thank you for the last episode, which actually did really well, and I wasn't expecting this Minisode series to even do great at all. It is a stopgap within the podcast, but if you guys are enjoying it, then that makes me really happy as well, that there is some value there besides it, again, just being a bit of a filler. As always, if you could leave a review wherever you can leave reviews for podcasts, that would greatly help me out and helps others find the show too, so be sure to do that, and also tell a friend about the podcast as well. So that is it. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you stay safe. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week for another minisode. I have been your host Jamar today, and this has been Get In The Mecha. The music in this production goes as follows: Synthwave by Alex McCulloch, Mandatory Overtime by Joth, and Different by Chasersgaming.